Hello everyone and welcome. This is Christine with Patter Crafts, and today I'm making a Christmas card using the Angels stamp set from CC Designs and the musical notes background stamp from My Favorite Things. So the first thing I want to do is stamp out my background. So I'm grabbing everything I need to do that, but I also need to trim down some cardstock. So I have some 100-pound cardstock here, and we're going to trim this to 5.5 by 4.25 pieces, and we're going to stamp one of those pieces with the musical notes background. So we'll go ahead and get all of this out. Now, because this is a background stamp, I want it to cover my entire panel. I'm not going to put it in the corner like I usually would because I'm afraid that the edge of the stamp might not stamp so well, so it needs to be in the middle. So I'm kind of planning where I'm going to put that piece of cardstock, and once I know exactly where it's going to be, I'm going to add a little bit of adhesive to the back just in case I need to stamp it more than once, which I do end up having to do. So that was a good thing. Because this is a background stamp, those magnets are not going to be very much help, so that is why I'm using some adhesive to hold that down. So once that's done, I'm using my Gina K Black Amalgam ink to stamp this entire background, and I am inking up the entire background, and then adding a decent amount of pressure. I'm kind of standing up over this, rubbing that down, and even though I did that, I still didn't stamp a couple of places really well. So we're going to ink this up a second time, focusing a lot of the pressure there on that middle part to try to get that to stamp out. And when I lift this back up, that spot still isn't quite right. I'm going to try again for a third time. For a third time, it still doesn't really, it's still not perfect, but I just decided we're going to go with it because there's a chance that my image is going to cover that, so I'm not going to put too much effort into trying to get that last little bit to stamp out. So we're going to grab some more cardstock, and we're going to stamp out the angel that looks like she is singing, because I'm using the musical notes background stamp, so I want her to look like she's singing. And we're going to go ahead and stamp her out again with the Gina K Black Amalgam ink. You can use Copic Markers with this ink. I also believe you can use like watercolors, because it is, I believe it's water resistant. Let me just double check. Yes, it is waterproof. So I don't tend to use a lot of watercolor, but I do use my Copics, and I can color with this just fine. So we are going to show the coloring of this image in today's video. She does not take too long to color. So for the blue part on her dress, I am using the Copic colors B21, B00, and B0000. So just outlining where I think the darker areas are going to be, spread out a little bit with that, and then blend it all together with the lightest shade. Then I'm going to bring in this C1 marker for the front of her dress and the bottom of her dress. And I don't feel like that C1 was enough, so I'm bringing in the C3, and then I will blend out that C1 again. When I do this and it's still kind of wet, I'm like, ooh, it looks like it might be a little too dark, but it does lighten up as it dries. And after it's dried, if I'm still not 100% happy with it, I could always kind of color over it with a blender marker, and that should help take away some of the ink and lighten it even more. But after it does dry, I'm content with how it looks. I probably won't do that again, but I'm not going to worry about it for now. So now we're going to color her hair. I'm just kind of experimenting with a couple of different E markers. I want her hair to be brown, but I don't always tend to go to the same E markers. I have several, and I just don't ever remember to write down all the combinations I use. I really should, but I always just kind of wing it. So I kind of laid down this really light, I believe it was E21 or E31. I'm not 100% sure which of those two, just to kind of add a little bit of color to where the darker marker is going to be. And then I'm going to bring in the E15 And then I'm bringing in this E33. When I lay the E33 down, I realized it really kind of needs something in between because the lighter and the darker areas are a little too light and a little too dark. So I'm going to bring in the E18 marker and just add a little bit of color in between the two colors just to kind of blend them out just a little bit. Not really blending the whole area, just adding some flicks of color. And I'm much happier with that. So I'm using this N1 marker for her wings. Her wings don't really show, and I only have one like neutral gray marker, so I figure that was plenty fine. Now we're going to go on to her skin tone. I tend to always use an E4 if there's going to be a shadow under a hairline or like where the clothing might be touching the face on the images. And in this case, her hair kind of frames her entire face. She's got like these little curly pieces coming down onto her cheeks, and then you've got her clothes there. So I just decided to outline her entire face with the E4 marker. Then I go in with the E21 and E11. Although maybe I didn't bring in the 2-1 today. I might have just gone to the E11. And definitely finished up with E00 and E000. Using a B23 for the bows on her shoes and C7 and C5 for her shoes. Once she is all colored, I'm going to go die cut her out with a stitched rectangle die. I'm also bringing in this silvery, glittery, really fun paper. This is from a 12 by 12 paper pad that I purchased a couple of years ago from Michael's. The texture of the paper is kind of plasticky and kind of odd, but it works in some places. It's easy to cut, but it's really hard to die cut. So I'm going to use this bigger piece to mat on the back of my, or on the front of my card. But because it's a scrap piece of paper, it doesn't quite fit over the entire front of the card. So I'm going to trim just a little bit off and give a little bit of the black border from the cardstock. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my musical note background right around, or right on top of that silver glitter paper. It just adds just a little bit of glitter and shine. And it's really pretty when you see it in person. But when I added my little angel to the glitter cardstock I'd cut out for her, it seemed like too much glitter paper as compared to what was already down. So I trimmed it down to mimic the panel. So once I've trimmed that down to where, you know, it's just a little bit of an edge on the image, we're going to pop that up on some foam tape and kind of put it at an angle on the card. I contemplate whether or not I'm going to put the sentiment on the front of the card. I choose not to. And I grab the inside, like a white piece of cardstock for the inside of the card. The first stamping, I do a little crooked and I decide to restamp that. And this sentiment says, "Love to you and yours." And we're going to go ahead and just pop that on the inside. And then we're going to add a little bit of embellishment onto the front. So I'm using some Nuvo glitter drops in the color Yellow Bird. Then I'm bringing in some white Blizzard Nuvo drops for her wings. And I also bring in some of these Nuvo jewel drops. They're kind of clear, they're translucent, but they kind of have like a little bluish color to them. And that is in the color Sea Breeze. So I'm adding just a little bit of that. I do also bring in some diamond stickles for just the bottom of her dress. And that will do it for today's card. So thank you so very much for joining me today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more and you're not already, hit that subscribe button. But until next time, bye.